Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The U.S. has signaled a major escalation in military strikes against Iran, while the White House says the war will end once President Trump determines that military objectives have been achieved. Meanwhile, Iran accused the U.S. and Israel of targeting civilians, saying more than 1,300 people have been killed since the war began. Iran has reportedly begun laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial global energy choke point. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Tehran to immediately remove the mines, saying failure to do so would bring severe consequences. The U.S. Department of Defense has declined to comment on reports that it's moving air defense systems in South Korea out of the country, adding that Washington remains focused on maintaining combat readiness on the Korean Peninsula. This comes amid growing concerns that the U.S. may be redeploying air defense assets to the Middle East for use in its war with Iran. We begin this morning with the conflict in the Middle East. The war between the United States, Israel, and Iran is showing no signs of slowing, with Washington preparing its most intense round of strikes yet, and Iran accusing the allies of mounting attacks on civilian targets. Our Buneran starts us off.
The conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran is intensifying as Washington signaled a major escalation in military strikes on Tuesday.
For example, today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
According to the Pentagon, Iranian ballistic missile launches have dropped by roughly 90% since the beginning of the war, while one-way attack drone strikes have fallen by more than 80%. U.S. officials say the military campaign is focused on dismantling Iran's missile stockpiles and launch systems, degrading its defense industry, destroying naval capabilities, and permanently preventing the country from obtaining nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the White House says the war will end once President Donald Trump determines that those military objectives have been achieved. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the administration believes Iran is rapidly losing its ability to threaten the United States and its allies. But Iranian officials are pushing back strongly. At the United Nations, Iran's ambassador accused the United States and Israel of deliberately targeting civilians and infrastructure, saying more than 1,300 people have been killed since the war began on February 28.
We reiterate our call on all member states to condemn this aggression and take urgent action to stop this criminal war against the Iranian people, a war that poses a serious threat to regional and international peace and security.
The war is also drawing in global powers. According to Iranian officials, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with his Iranian counterpart by phone to discuss ways to end the war, reiterating Russia's opposition to the attacks and offering support for efforts to resolve the conflict. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And U.S. intelligence says Iran has begun laying naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz, raising fears of a major disruption to global oil supply. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Tehran to immediately remove the mines, saying failure to do so would trigger severe military consequences. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. intelligence says Iran has begun laying naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz, raising fears of a major disruption to the world's most important oil transit route. According to CNN on Tuesday, citing two sources familiar with U.S. intelligence reports, Iran has deployed several dozen mines in recent days in the narrow waterway. Officials say the mining remains limited for now, but Tehran still retains around 80 to 90% of its small boats and mine-laying vessels, meaning it could rapidly deploy hundreds more. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which effectively controls the strait alongside the regular navy, has the capability to deploy mine-laying craft, explosive boats, and shore-based missile systems across the waterway. The Guard Corps previously warned that any ship passing through the strait would be attacked, and shipping traffic has slowed sharply since the war began. U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that American forces had already struck and destroyed 10 inactive Iranian mine-laying vessels. Posting on Truth Social, Trump warned Iran to immediately remove any mines from the strait or face severe military consequences, saying retaliation would be at a level never seen before. Meanwhile, confusion briefly emerged over whether U.S. forces had begun escorting oil tankers through the waterway. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright posted on social media that the U.S. Navy had escorted a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz, but the message was quickly deleted after it spread in global media. The White House later confirmed the claim was inaccurate, saying the U.S. Navy has not escorted any vessels through the strait. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and handles about 20% of global oil shipments. Iran's threat to block the route have pushed oil prices higher and sent insurance costs for ships passing through the strait soaring. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The U.S. Department of Defense has declined to comment on reports that air defense systems stationed in South Korea are being moved to the Middle East amid the war with Iran. A Pentagon official said Tuesday that the military does not discuss the movement of specific capabilities for operational security reasons, but stressed that U.S. Forces Korea remains focused on maintaining combat readiness on the Korean Peninsula. The response comes after the Washington Post reported that parts of the U.S. THAAD anti-missile system in South Korea are being redeployed to reinforce defenses against Iranian missile and drone attacks. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung acknowledged the situation, but noted that Seoul maintains one of the world's highest defense spending levels and a military ranked among the global top 5. And President Lee has called for stronger preparedness as tensions in the Middle East continue. During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, he also raised the possibility of a supplementary budget to help ease the burden on the domestic economy. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
As tensions in the Middle East enter their second week following the U.S. military strikes on Iran, President Lee Jae-myung told his cabinet that their role is more critical than ever.
과거 어느 때보다도 더 절박하게 또 충실하게 최선을 다하면 지금의 상황을 더 나은 상황으로 만들 수 있다.
Presiding over a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Lee said stabilizing prices is the government's most urgent task as uncertainty grows in energy supplies, logistics, and financial markets. The government plans to introduce a temporary price ceiling on petroleum products within the week. President Lee instructed the finance minister to ensure the measure minimizes the burden on customers.
생산원가가 올랐다. 그거 하면 그 시점에는 다시 또 최고 가격을 변경해야 되는데 기존에 이미 한 열흘 이상 이렇게 이미 올려받은 부분 그 부분을 고려해서 실제 유가가 오르더라도 그때 바로 최고 가격을 올리지 말고
Lee proposed imposing a price cap during last week's extraordinary cabinet meeting. He warned of possible price gouging by oil refiners, citing rising fuel prices, despite South Korea holding petroleum reserves equivalent to 7 months of supply. The Fair Trade Commission has launched an investigation into possible collusion among refiners. The president even mentioned preparing a supplementary budget to ease the burden on consumers if the Middle East situation drags on.
We could consider cutting fuel taxes on gasoline by another 10% or increasing direct support. A combination of such measures could help ease polarization while protecting people's livelihoods.
이번 어차피 조기에 추경을 해야 될 상황인 것 같으니까 지금 재정 지원이나 소상공인 지원이나 뭐 한계 기업들 지원인 뭐 등등 할래도 좀 추가의 재정이
South Korea currently maintains a 7% tax cut on gasoline, with the maximum reduction capped at 37%. These discussions come as the Blue House has designated this week as an all-out response week to address developments in the Middle East, with a focus on public safety and economic stability. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Global oil prices have been fluctuating sharply in recent days over fears of supply disruptions. Oil climbed to nearly $120 a barrel before falling back after U.S. President Donald Trump sent mixed signals about the war with Iran and as G7 nations mulled releasing emergency oil supplies. We're joined today by Professor Kim Young-jin, professor at Seogang Business School. So Professor Kim, what's your take on the recent moves in crude oil prices, and how is this affecting the global economy?
Yeah, good morning. As you mentioned, recently oil prices, have been on a wild ride. It has been primarily driven by the conflict involving Iran and the looming threat, Hormuz Strait blockage. Brent and WTI recently spiked, to 120 per barrel, which is the levels not seen since 2022, before retreating to the low 90s. That followed hint of a massive strategic petroleum reserve release by G7 nations. I believe the oil price would be high for a while. It might cause a serious ripple effect like stagflation and high interest rate. If oil stays above $100, global GDP could drop by 0.4%. If it hits 150, we face a genuine risk of stagflation, which means stagnant growth paired with high inflation. If it happens, central bank may remain hawkish, potentially delaying the anticipated interest rate cut to combat energy-driven inflation. So the high oil price would hurt the global economy.
Right, and some analysts have said the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz could push prices to $150 a barrel, but with oil prices dropping to around $80 a barrel recently, is it fair to say supply disruption fears and oil prices are under control now?
I'm not sure, that's it is fair to say we control the situation, but basically the drop caused by the wording of Mr. Trump, the war is very complete, pretty much. And the possibility of massive strategic petroleum reserve release by G7 nations, these two things influence the dropping of the oil price. So we have to see what comes next or how things evolve this week. My basic understanding is that oil prices, have the potential to spike significantly higher if the Middle East, crisis escalates further. Though a full-blown global recession is considered a risk rather than a certainty. The problem is that the risk has materially increased. For the U.S. and other major economies, a sustained price of $120 or 25 per barrel is often cited as a tipping point where consumer spending collapse and then inflation forces central banks to keep interest rate prohibitively high. This situation will cause stagflation. As households who are already stretched to breaking point by previous price hike struggle with a new energy shock.
I see. And here in Korea, the government is planning to impose a fuel price cap for the first time in 3 decades to shield the economy from an energy shock. Now, will this new measure bring down prices for consumers, and what are the side effects? How might this affect oil companies here in South Korea?
Yeah, recently, every media, covered a story of, the price cap, which is called the maximum price system, right? So the South Korean president and government all, announced this plan to implement the fuel price cap for the first time since 1997 price liberalization. So that's a long time ago. This emergency measure, which was rooted in the Petroleum and Petroleum Alternative Fuel Business Act, aims to contain a sharp spike in domestic gasoline and diesel prices, which have surpassed, 1,900 won per liter, and triggered by the intensifying conflict in the Middle East. The measure is designed to provide immediate relief and improve price predictability by direct price control. It will prevent the gas stations from passing on global prices surges asymmetrically, means raising prices quickly but lowering prices slowly. it will come with some potential side effect, to my knowledge, including, supply shortage, leveling up, phenomenon, and the financial burden of government to make up the losses of those companies, and quality degradation. If government sets the cap below production cost of companies, refiners may reduce import or production to avoid losses, potentially leading to fuel shortages at the pump, and the quality of the oil might be degraded, and all gas stations may provide gas at the exact same price of the maximum price. So government need to come up with complement measures like additional fuel tax cut and strategic reserve release and direct consumer support. And this kind of alternative measures are now being discussed by the government.
Right, and it's not just oil prices, because the Korean stock market has also been on a roller coaster recently. Why is this, and how should investors respond?
Well, as you mentioned, the Korean stock market has entered a period of extreme roller coaster volatility as of March 2026. This primarily due to a combination of external geopolitical shocks and internal structural vulnerabilities. South Korea is facing a simultaneous surge in oil prices, the $1 exchange rate, which is approaching 1,500 won, the highest in 17 years, and inflation. Secondly, Korea is a major importer, energy importer, so Korea's economy is highly vulnerable to the U.S.-Israel-Iran conflict. On March 4th, the Kospi suffered a historic 12% plunge. It's the largest single-day drop ever. Followed by a near 10% rebound the next day as the ceasefire and rumors emerged. Thirdly, the Kospi is heavily weighted toward semiconductors and shipbuildings. So like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, the market capital of these two companies take 40% of whole market capital. So the centralization is too much. While their fundamentals may remain strong due to AI demand, but they are the first to be offloaded by foreign investors during global risk of episode. So investors need to be very careful, even though looks like the market recovers, but still we have potential risk of the Iran war. So we have to see what's going on this week at least. So you have to wait and see and rebalance your portfolio a little bit toward oil industries and war industries kind of.
Right. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
South Korean Paralympic star Kim Yoon-ji has won her second medal at the 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Paralympics. The 19-year-old took silver in the women's cross-country skiing sprint sitting final on Tuesday at the Tessero Cross County Stadium in Italy, finishing 3 minutes and 10.1 seconds behind American Oksana Masters. Kim had already made history on March 8th by winning gold in the women's 12.5-kilometer biathlon individual event, becoming the first South Korean woman to claim Winter Paralympic gold. Kim has also become the first South Korean athlete to win multiple medals at a Winter Paralympics since Shin Hye-yeon, who won 1 gold and 1 bronze at the 2018 Pyeongchang Games. As wellness culture becomes more and more popular, young Koreans are turning to traditional healing practices. Moxibustion and rice enzyme spas are emerging as new experiential wellness spaces. Our Cho Young-in tells us more.
Opening the door, a slightly smoky herb scent of mugwort fills the air. The shop specializes in traditional Korean Moxibustion therapy, which uses heat and smoke of burning mugwort. Customers lie on treatment beds, relaxing as the heated mugwort is first placed beneath their feet. The therapy continues with fumigation treatment along the back before mechanical Moxibustion devices are set on the stomach to deliver steady warmth.
My hands and feet tend to get cold, and I often feel tired. I heard mugwort Moxibustion is good for your health, so I looked for a place near my home and decided to try it.
Nearby, a rice enzyme spa, once mainly enjoyed by older generations, now offers another popular wellness experience for younger visitors. Here, people bury themselves in warm fermented rice bran, leaving only their faces exposed. The heat generated from fermentation is believed to help detoxify the body, improve blood circulation, and strengthen the immunity system.
In the past, most visitors were older people. But these days, many younger customers are coming too, after seeing it on social media or YouTube.
Spaces like this are redefining traditional therapy as a modern healing experience to recharge both the body and mind. Experts say the trend reflects how the digitally native generation treat traditional wellness practices as shareable experiences.
Nowadays, when people see something on social media that's said to be good for their health, they want to try it themselves. Experience-based consumption has become a major trend.
The relatively affordable price of these activities has helped them emerge as a cost-effective wellness experience. As younger generations explore new ways to care for their health, traditional health practices are finding new life in Korea today. Cho Young-in, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. The United Arab Emirates has halted operations at its largest refinery following an Iranian drone strike. UAE state-owned giant ADNOC shut down the Ruwais refinery on Tuesday as a precautionary measure after a drone attack caused a massive fire. This industrial complex serves as the UAE's primary energy hub and is the fourth largest single-site refinery in the world. Also on Tuesday, the Israeli military confirmed it launched a new wave of targeted strikes against Iranian missile launchers. These launchers reportedly stood on high alert, ready to fire toward Israeli territory. Canadian authorities are increasing security at diplomatic sites nationwide after gunmen opened fire on the U.S. consulate in Toronto. Toronto police on Tuesday morning responded to a shooting at the U.S. consulate after two suspects fired handguns from a vehicle. No injuries were reported, but investigators recovered gun shells at the scene. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the shooting a reprehensible act of intimidation. In response, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police raised security at U.S. and Israeli diplomatic buildings in Toronto and Ottawa. This attack follows a series of recent shootings at local synagogues. Officials are now investigating whether these incidents are linked to the ongoing Iran war. Ukraine has struck a critical missile component factory deep inside Russian territory. The Ukrainian military on Tuesday deployed British Storm Shadow missiles to hit the facility, which produces essential electronics for the Russian war effort. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky confirmed the operation, stating the components made at the factory power the missiles that strike Ukrainian civilians. Ukraine's general staff described the Kremny factory in the Bryansk region as a critically important link in the production of Russian high-precision weapons. Local Russian officials reported 6 deaths and 37 injuries following the attack. Tech giant Meta has acquired Moltbook, a viral platform where AI agents interact and perform tasks autonomously. The deal, confirmed on Tuesday, integrates the Moltbook leadership team into Meta Superintelligence Labs to accelerate the development of AI that actually does things. Moltbook gained global attention for its ability to let agents manage calendars, send emails, and shop without human intervention. Meta views this as a leap toward the future of productivity, but critics such as Elon Musk warn the platform represents the early stages of a singularity.
Air quality will remain poor in many parts today, with daily average ultrafine dust levels expected to reach bad levels across the central regions and parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces. And speaking of which, parts of Gyeongsang-do are also under dry weather advisories, as well as Daegu, Busan, and Ulsan. So extra caution is needed to prevent wildfires. It was a chilly start to the day, but highs will rise fast, and Seoul will be getting up to 10 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju will be topping out at 14 degrees Celsius under partly cloudy skies in most parts of Korea. Afternoon temperatures will rise even higher tomorrow at 13 degrees Celsius here in Seoul and will remain higher than norms for the rest of the week. Meanwhile, rain or snow is expected mainly along the East Coast tomorrow and the following day.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.